All right. Josh,
Hi. How are you?
welcome to that conference. Welcome to
Thank you.
that podcast. Thank you for speaking. Thank you for being here. Thank you for setting up. How did that land? Because I
just-
came in the room and then all of a sudden I'm like, who's this guy? Oh, that's Josh.
I just really like setting up at conferences.
Yeah?
And anything. I enjoy seeing people doing something and participating in a way that makes it easier. It's fun.
I think it's super cool, and there's a lot of I don't want this to sound tongue in cheek, but when you get involved, like in that kind of stuff, you end up forming new relationships that
Yeah.
you've never had before. You know, it's not even. It's almost like it's a dinner, right? Yeah, you're setting up and doing stuff, but then you get to look at all this and go,
Yeah.
I put this stick over there.
It gave me a renewed appreciation for all the stuff that goes into, for example, this ridiculous stage behind us. Like, all these trees were carried. Half of them had to be assembled from
Yep.
like 2 or 3 pieces. The branches are all individually
Yep.
placed. It's an
Yeah.
artistic creation.
It really is
For a
and,
conference.
And it somebody yesterday was like, "Wait a minute, that's a real tree." I was like, "Yeah, it's a birch tree. Yeah, we cut it down and made a thing out of it. Like,
It's really
worked."
cute.
No, a lot of those are.
Some of them were
Props.
Thank God the biggest trees. There's some really tall trees behind
Yeah,
us.
they're
Those
just-
are fake.
Yeah, they're just some kind of they're
Plywood or-
they're the cardboard tubes that you would use to for forms for like deck, like your deck rails, your
Oh,
deck
okay.
posts.
Yeah.
When you dig the hole and you need to form to pour the concrete into for the wood to
Cool.
go down. So yeah, very deep holes for things. But
Things. No, I really appreciate when the conferences like this one go above and beyond and do something that makes the experience just a little better. Like, you're not just here to get money from sponsors and have them spew their
Yeah.
stuff. It's like you were saying in the keynote surrounding speeches. It's a community. You're investing in the people and things around you, and I really
Absolutely.
like that.
I appreciate that. All right. So where I want to go with you today, or this journey I want to talk down, you're full time on open source.
Mhm.
So let's just define what that means, because I'd also put myself in that boat because we have all of that conference and that.us. It's all open source. It's been wonderful to do in that way. I don't expect that people use it. That's not really the point. The point was that it's there to share, show, and teach more so than a library for somebody to consume and go further. So what does that look like for you? Like, define that. If we just define content creator on stage, why don't you define open source guru?
Sure. It's a hard thing to define, and I've been doing this for less than a year, so this definition will be kind of inaccurate
Evolving?
and precise, evolving. Yeah.
Refactoring?
I was recently informed the difference between refactoring, restructuring, or architecting on a podcast. But for me, the open source life is, instead of working for one specific company, getting a paycheck, health insurance, benefits,
Yep.
etc.,
Big bro.
those are things.
Those are things.
I work not necessarily for myself, but for projects. I work on some projects, some of which I steer, maintain, created, and some of which are other people's projects on the internet.
So would you would the corollary there be like a consulting gig?
I did actually some
Is
consulting.
that what you mean by project, or what does
Like-
project mean?
Like a full open source project.
Oh,
Like
okay.
the one that I don't work directly on ESLint mostly, but that is one that people know.
Okay.
It is a software project independent of any company. There are some
Yes.
dedicated maintainers who
Yep.
spend time on it.
Yep.
And it receives funding through voluntary donations by
Yep.
people and
Yep.
companies.
Yep. Use it all the time.
I'm glad you do.
Yes.
Do you use it with TypeScript code?
No, we can argue about TypeScript later.
I would love that. I
Okay.
honestly really love discussing TypeScript
Yeah.
with people because, like everything in their industry, there are so many pros and cons, and everyone has a different, unique take on it and set
Yep.
of pros and cons.
Yep.
But yeah, so I work on primarily TypeScript ESLint, which is the tooling that lets you run ESLint and Prettier on TypeScript code.
Yep.
So that project is not owned by any company, nor, in my opinion, should it be. It is a full community thing. There are 3-4 of us on the maintenance side. 2 of us have jobs. One is me, one is a student.
So then what's your job? Like, where are you pulling cash from to feed yourself?
Well, first of all, my wife has a tech job, so that's where the health insurance, et cetera, comes from. Thank you, Mariah.
Yeah. Yes.
But I,
And that's not to be understated either. The minute you have to take on health insurance costs,
Oh.
if you're in the U.S., it is a whole it is a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
As somebody who has to take on health insurance costs.
Oh yeah, we both have things that come through health insurance, but I have three primary sources of revenue. Previously, four when I did consulting, which was a lot of fun, but was a time expenditure that wasn't open
Yep,
source.
hour for hour.
Yep. So one is my personal GitHub sponsors, which is about $300 a month. That's just people who have voluntarily decided to give me mostly monthly contributions. There was a student here, thank you, Yona, who started signing up as a $1 a month sponsor.
Oh,
and
there you go.
I appreciate that
Yep.
greatly. The second source is right now about $1,200 to $1,400 a month from TypeScript ESLint. We have our own, not GitHub sponsors, but Open Collective, similar thing.
Yep.
We put company logos on our README as a thank you. And then also I wrote a book on TypeScript, learning TypeScript, and that gives me $1,500 to $2,000 a month in revenue,
Okay.
and that's it.
Okay. So why? I mean, it seems like you're only a few steps away from content creation and trying to make revenue from videos and things like that. Is there a reason you're not doing that?
It's.
I mean, you wrote the book, right? Slice the book up and
yeah.
make this smaller.
The next logical step then would be to create videos on the book, have walkthroughs, Pluralsight,
Sure.
etc. On my list of things to do, it is near the top of that list, within the section of I just don't have the time for it, and I
Fair.
really wish I did.
Fair. So do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
No,
Why is that?
I am not entrepreneurial. I am working on a close analogy would be like a shared public good. Like
Okay.
I'm maintaining a forest trail. I'm not
Okay.
going out and creating a
fair.
park service.
Okay. I like that. I mean that.
Topical, yeah.
No, like I mean that. Yeah, it's very on brand. So you're pulling in. Would you say I don't know? We'll call it $3,000 a month. Not very much.
Sure.
Is there a path? Is there a path to make more? Is that a sustainable path? And where I'm going is, the dollars and cents or the time that you're putting in to make this. To make these tools available for others, which I'm consuming, right? Them going away is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it sustainable?
It is-
Is your time, your contribution sustainable to it?
Not yet, but it is on the path to be. I previously worked at Codecademy, which was a lovely place to work.
Yep.
I just wanted to do open source. I quit them and end of January 2022, took February off, and have been doing open source since then. It's now January, so I've been doing this less than a year. So the fact that I hit minimum wage federal in the States in December, to me, is both really funny, that's a terrible accomplishment to be excited
Yeah,
about,
right.
but it's also, I think, a good accomplishment. But I've only been doing this for less than a year. I'm still growing. I'm still learning.
Sure.
I think 2022 for me was a year of exploration to figure out what I can do to reach sustainability.
Sure.
And 2023 is when I really execute, when I really double down on the important projects that are impactful and help the industry and give me visibility.
Sure.
So I think by the end of the year, I will have not just a minimum wage hit, but a sustainable living wage.
Slightly higher. Yeah, I worry about that kind of stuff in our industry overall. I feel like there's, this mantra where everything should be free, and yet nothing's free, right? Your time's
Nothing
not
is free.
The worst thing that happens is when these people who have, or anybody who has put a bunch of time into something can't do it, life changes, and then all of a sudden stops.
Yeah.
Right? Not only does the collective knowledge leave, but the thing gets orphaned or stagnant, and then the cycle starts all over again, right?
Mhm.
Thankfully, ESLint and Prettier have been around a long time, but you see a lot of projects that instead of people taking over, people recreate differently. And,
Yeah.
and in some cases, that's probably the right thing because hindsight's 20/20. In other cases, it's just, it wasn't my thing. And so I worry about it because I really wish more developers would invest in the things around them, in companies too, that lift them up, right? I buy
Absolutely.
people's courses and books, not even with the intent to ever read some of them, but that I know that helps where they're going at, and online courses are an easy one. Hell, I gift them to people, just to be nice. But so thank you for doing that, because I know that it's not, as somebody who uses the tools, thank you. Keep on doing that.
Thank you.
Because it makes my life easier.
I agree. I agree that it's a huge issue in the industry. I see parallels with very important, arguably in some ways even more important issues like accessibility and DEI.
Oh yeah.
Where you and I, we humans, we know the correct thing to do is to be accessible. The correct thing to do is to not screw up your diversity, equity, inclusion. And a lot of people make arguments in favor of doing those things the right way, but there for a while wasn't a lot of communal knowledge on how to make those arguments effectively.
Yeah.
And thank heavens now we do have a lot more communal knowledge on those two. But for open source, I think we're still in the early stages of explaining to companies, this is why your supply chain is very insecure. This is why you should sponsor, and these are the benefits you'll get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, how much company support do they really get at the end?
It varies. There are some companies such as Salesforce, Microsoft, NX, very good.
Yeah.
You mentioned projects going out of maintenance. Lerna was abandoned for a lack of time, and then NX, the company, took over Lerna in a very good way, and now it is no longer abandoned. We get money from all sorts of different companies, but
nowhere near the balance of the people who use it.
No,
nowhere near.
I'm starting a project this year. We're discussing logo creation on GitHub now called Tentatively Open Contributions Project, something like that, where I want to make a set of resources that people can go to for any particular common need of explanation. I am a, let's say, developer who wants to explain to my manager why the team should contribute $50 a month to some project.
Okay.
Here's the list of resources of, here are the data-informed reasons why that's useful, and this will be the impact.
That's super hard. I mean, that's
so hard.
It's very. We've been trying to do that for that conference for, God, I think years. They're trying to put together the sell my boss, if you will, of these are the things you can learn. It's just, one, I don't always hear all the stories, right? And it's hard to articulate the offshoot of things that happen in this. I don't know.
Yeah. The intangibles. My developers are more effective because they know the project. You can't measure that accurately. There's no A/B testing for open source involvement.
I mean, here's a good example. Here you are here. If somebody, I look at it as our job to make sure that people know that you're here. You can argue that we don't do the best of job at it. We're trying to improve that. But if the person over there is like, hey, really struggling with getting this tool chain set up, and you go, well, Josh is like right there.
He wrote the error message. Go yell at him.
Right. Why don't you guys just sit down and look at it? That time is invaluable, you know. But
and that's I think another issue.
Piece is hard.
The connecting is really hard, and if you don't have sustained investment and involvement in open source, you don't have people like, not to toot my own horn, who are going around giving talks about here's how you set up TypeScript ESLint.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of gap in communication and knowledge sharing that is because we just have part-time workers here and there on open source.
Yeah. So in this day and age, you wrote a book on TypeScript. I'm just kind of growing down the chain here. Why write a book?
I really like books. I don't like videos for learning. I'm aware of how, not millennial that is, of how many people learn from videos.
Oh, I wasn't even saying that was the other option. I mean, you wrote the book.
But what I'm getting to is that I think every medium needs a canonical best or set of best resources, and I wasn't seeing that for TypeScript.
Okay.
I see that for say videos for TypeScript. For example, Matt Pocock is like one of the great content creators now, James Q. Quick, obviously. But for books, there hadn't been a TypeScript one in a little while. I really like TypeScript. I think it's a wonderful language. I look forward to debating with you on its pros and cons. It's got a lot of pros. Everything has cons. But personally, having written large-ish for solo person JavaScript apps that were complete trash, absolute garbage, and then cleaning them up with ESLint and then TypeScript. I've seen the improvements in developer experience, documentation, debuggability, just letting you know you're being a fool. It's really useful. So I wanted to take this thing that had benefited me so much and make a good resource for everyone that, of course, selfishly has my name on it and gets me money.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Have you thought about different ways? Who'd you write on? It was O'Reilly?
O'Reilly.
Have you thought, do you know Dave Thomas? Prague Pub?
I don't think I've met Pragmatic Programmer's author.
He's here.
Would love to.
You should have a conversation with him about content. Because we got into it yesterday I interviewed him yesterday, and we were talking about like the evolution of the book, and what does content kind of mean today, right?
Oh, I'm sure that's interesting.
So, I think if you wrote a book, how do you think of evolving the book?
There's a
Not just like updates. I mean,
Sure,
is
yeah.
there a secondary thing to this that pulls in more people who maybe don't like the physical aspect of said book?
It's a good question. One of the problems with books is that they are released and then things change. There are already TypeScript language features that I would have included in the book. There are typos in the book that, from the rush at the end, I just, I'll tell you what I did, and then that's a small thing, and then what I'd love to do, which is larger. What I did was I moved any sort of projects or framework-specific stuff out of the book into an open source set of repos, in part because
You can change it.
you can change it, and in part because I don't think that belongs in the book. I don't think setting up whatever, React 17 at the time, belongs in a book. That should be on a site that has a repo that you can clone and file issues on and so on.
I agree.
But yeah, if I had time long term, what I would have loved to do is create a lot of blog posts, a video walkthrough of each lesson, maybe some paid content where I can walk a learner through the whole book as an experience. I think that would be a good, perhaps even one of the right answers to the question of what is content in this day and age.
Yeah.
But I think there's still a lot of value in having one static resource, something you can pull down physically or electronically, like many of the learning TypeScript readers do. It's on ebook platforms such as O'Reilly's.
Yeah.
I don't personally partake, but I'm told it's quite useful.
Yeah. I mean, the content curation, if you will, kind of at scale. When you go out, there's a lot of shit out there.
Yeah.
And evaluating whether or not it's, I don't want to say right, but where on the level of relevancy or rightness or guide is, it's very difficult today.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people are just generating, I shouldn't say generating, but pushing content for corporate purposes that interesting blog posts, maybe architecturally not the right thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad you got it to work together. Didn't need to be on the internet.
Yeah.
we shouldn't have made that work together.
There's a limited timestamp that most content is available and reasonable for enduring.
Yeah.
And I think one of the benefits of going through the process of creating a large single piece of content like a book is that you have to be very clear on what that target audience is and the time period it's intended for.
Sure.
Learning TypeScript is for people who have JavaScript experience. I'm not teaching you async await or closures, and that's all you need. Whereas a lot of TypeScript, for example, content out there is tailored to who the person who authored it thinks is the typical programmer, which is someone with, say, C# experience, which is not always the case. And because there's so few books that get published, I don't have to compete with 50,000 other TikTokers, YouTubers, whatever, to try to figure out who's got the best organic SEO today. It's a good advantage.
Yeah. How long did it take you to do?
About a year. Two-thirds of
pretty good.
that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you're clipping along pretty good.
I actually really enjoyed it. I like writing. I don't think I'm particularly great at it the way some people just naturally flow, but I read a good amount about writing from authors who say, I can't write, I could never do this, and these multinational best-time sellers. Two-thirds of that I was employed, one-third I was full-time open source with quotes, because I was also writing a book.
Yeah.
And I might do a second edition eventually if O'Reilly's up for it, but who knows?
So, TypeScript for JavaScript, folks. Why are you trying to get people to switch?
Well, I give a set of talks about how to explain and motivate something.
Yeah.
And the big thing there is you should always try to figure out who you're talking to, what motivates them, and what pains them to try to speak to that, which makes it really hard to answer very reasonable, good to ask questions, such as why TypeScript?
Yeah.
Because everyone has different pains. But some of the common pains I've seen in JavaScript folks are lack of good documentation at the granular code level. JSDoc is a mediocre format at best, and it's not enforced. Poor refactoring tooling, like extract to constant in new file, rename, find all references, and so on. And the inability to really enforce the intent of the code be matched. I speak a lot about how TypeScript allows you to describe, document, and enforce your intent. That, say, a function parameter is supposed to be a string and only ever a string.
Yeah.
So I think that combination of documentation, dev tooling, and enforcement is quite powerful.
I don't disagree. Can't disagree with that.
But
Not really a but. I mean, we don't use it, but there's only two of us. If I had a large team, right, then those semantics kind of come rushing in fast, much faster than when there's two people who are. No doubt our code base could be better, but every code base could be better.
find me the perfect one, please.
Right,
I'd love to
yeah,
see it.
Right. And I think some of my biggest challenges just in the web space now is just the tooling chains and how complicated. I mean, simple and complicated all at the same time, and it's a lot to string together. And boy, when it breaks, you're like, Jesus,
Oh, yeah.
Christ, what am I?
I have a
Where
package.
the hell did it go wrong?
Yeah, it's. I have a package that I have been working on since maybe September, October. Template TypeScript node package. It is just a good starter template.
Yep.
I'm still working on it.
Yep.
It's not done. It's got bugs. It is so difficult to get tooling right,
It is.
especially when you want to go above the minimum and actually have good tooling.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. But I love this. I think this is fantastic because the more you are able to iterate on your tooling, the more you're able to break things and cause that unfortunate pain, the faster you're able to move. And we're accelerating so fast.
I cannot just. And there's a lot of things that I just like. Prettier and ESLint, like they're godsends for me because I don't care. Like just
do it.
Well, like okay, I don't want to get in a debate like about the things. Like just reformat it to be that so that we're all consistent because I don't give a shit. I really don't care. Put the comma on the back, don't put the comma on the back. I don't care. Like, let's just roll. Like, make it readable, make it nice, make it consistent. Move on. Let that happen at check-in so that we're all good. Get it the hell out of my face.
Yeah.
But there are some very large wars out there about.
Oh, yeah. There's this huge thread on the Prettier repo of whether they will switch to tabs by default for the next version. And there are arguments all the time about what the default behavior should be and that and everything.
I don't understand. I only needed one person to tell me why it should be tabs. And
Accessibility?
Accessibility. And then I was like, right, okay, it totally makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
Why are we not doing this? Just change your tab width. Like,
Yeah.
you want it smaller, make it smaller.
It's incredible to me how people who are very smart and have very well-informed opinions in some area just don't have the bandwidth to investigate and re-evaluate in other areas.
I'm mind-boggled that this is an argument.
Yeah.
Like, it was funny before and cliche this, but then when somebody said accessibility, I was like, oh shit.
I was
course.
on Team Spaces. I have arguments for why.
Team Spaces.
And now I'm on Team Tabs by necessity because accessibility.
Yeah, right.
But there's also another lesson we're touching on here, which is the power of auto-fixing. And this is one of the lessons that JavaScript linting learned the hard way, that you need to have an auto-fixer for a rule to be really respected, unless the rule is so shockingly useful that everyone has to use it. We would constantly enable these very good rules by default that don't have clear fix paths or auto-fixers, and users were just trained to ignore the linter, to turn it off, to uninstall the dependency, to ESLint disable next line. And it's such a bad problem that there's not great dev tooling, like editor support for really guiding you to resolution.
Yeah.
And we just trained this whole generation of web devs to hate the linter, which,
I've learned a ton from the linter.
Good.
Like, I think it's great. Like, here's been my approach to it. Anytime I get a linting error and I look at it and I go, why did this flag the way it did? And then you go back and read the reason and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay, cool. Again, I don't care, right? Make it work consistently. I don't care if I have to go. The biggest one was where you put the variable it was one of the variables in the assignment for a for loop when you're incrementing it.
Use plus
Instead of
equals
it-
1. Or,
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of, plus plus. And it's like, oh, that's,
That's
I get down with that. Yep, that makes sense.
But I really respect and appreciate you saying this. I'm going to start tearing up here out of joy that you get an error message or warning or some such and you investigated it.
Yeah.
It is weird to me that is something to be commended, that's not the default behavior for everyone,
Yes,
yet here we
yeah.
are. And the same thing happens with TypeScript. TypeScript has a somewhat well-earned reputation of cryptic error messages. But if you have the time, you can go through even the most cryptic of TS error messages and figure out the underlying reason why they're there,
Yeah. Yeah.
which unfortunately many people choose not to or just don't have the time to do.
Yeah. How, given that ESLint is so ingrained in the ecosystem, prettier as well, how much collaboration goes on between the other tooling chains that all try to play together?
ESLint and Prettier and TypeScript, TypeScript and ESLint.
How much? Any?
Unfortunately, little.
Okay.
Every team is overloaded.
I mean, I get it, but
Yeah.
at least my theories of why it's so hard are validated by maybe if we spent more time, it would be better.
If the industry spent more money, we'd have the time to talk to
Correct.
each other.
Yep.
But I'll give you an example. Right now, there is a pending rewrite happening that's in the early stages of ESLint. Nicholas Zachas, creator maintainer, very excited about this. They started this huge thread of all these ideas, and they're going to rewrite ESLint for better. At the same time, in TypeScript ESLint, we have some performance needs that we need fixed. We need APIs added to ESLint, like changes to the existing APIs, so that we can be fast. And those two projects are both big, and just not going to happen at the same time. There's just no time for it. And there's a debate going on of should we fix the old ESLint, should we wait for the new, and so on. And all this is happening while I'm going through a lot of family things now. I don't have time for this. Another maintainer just got COVID, another just had a kid, another's a student. No one has time.
Right.
There's life. We don't have full-time jobs. So I think that's a part of why the web tooling ecosystem has embraced the Unix philosophy of do one thing, because we only have time for one thing, each of us. And you can swap out those one things, then, like you said, the maintainer inevitably goes AWOL.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I really wish, I mean, I'm certainly not complaining by any stretch. I use the tools, they're great. I'm amazed that they work as well as they do. I know that when we started our open source journey, not only do I feel like we wrote incredibly better code because I call it being naked, right? Just there. There's a certain bit of humility when you're like, well, there it is. Go ahead and complain. I don't know. It's cool. I just appreciate the shit out of it.
Yeah, I like the humility point, and I think that's one of the big advantages of open source. A lot of people who I talk to who are considering it and don't do it are blocked by their own unwillingness to put themselves and their code out there. That to them, the code is an extension and reflection of who they are, and they will be judged. But the correct way of looking at it, I think, is we're all learning, we're all doing different things, and even if your code has every single flaw that I spend my career trying to avoid, it is better for both of us, for me to see that I have failed you and for you to understand how it can be improved.
Well, and I mean, honestly, our code base is a better one because it's in the open, even silly things like secrets, right? We have to manage secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Our architecture is lots of back-end services and APIs and gateways and Cloudflares and, edge this and cache that and all of that. And, the thing has to run and deploy, right? We come from the aspect of if somebody was to contribute, how do I accept it? 2, how can I trust it, right? Because that was a thing that I never really expected when you get you start taking on open source contributions. 2, how do you manage all this stuff, right? It's not easy to get other people involved in the thing. So, and then people submit contributions that you can't take because it just makes it works, but it makes no sense
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, there's the whole spectrum of thought there. Of, on one hand, you have a project, and just because it's in the open doesn't mean you should just accept whatever trash is
Yep.
thrown at you. But on the other hand, if you have the ability, it can be very good to, on one step, work actively with people to take that, rough and turn it into diamond.
Yep.
Or even just allow the project to be worse, to take in a bad code change, a known this is technically working but bad, and then create a follow-up issue saying, hey, as discussed with this pull request,
Right.
I'd really like to see these changes, good first issue.
Right.
Which is hard. It is really hard to be able to consistently do that without,
Yes.
burning yourself and the project out.
Yeah.
But the benefit then is you get to have these people who are new to your project, new to open source, get experience in the real world.
Yeah. How do you guys? I mean, what's the level of contributions you get back to any of them? I mean, I haven't looked in a while.
Sure. TypeScript ESLint has a fairly okay level of contribution. We have a few power users. We have people who come in and out. The unfortunate thing is it's a linter. Linters involve ASTs. The
Yep.
fact that I just said the word ASTs has already turned off a third of the viewership here. It is a kind of intimidating topic. I don't think it should be, but it is for some. So one of the projects that I embarked on this past year was to try to explain, no, it's not some high-level, you need a PhD thing. This is how an AST works. Abstract syntax tree. It represents your code. You can work with it. But still, I'm trying to find more projects like my template TypeScript node package where you can contribute just having graduated from a boot camp. And I think once I get those projects, I'll have a much happier answer to the question of how many people actually contribute.
Do you know anything about Unison?
Oh my God, they were. Let's say no.
Okay.
I know I talked to someone from there a few months ago.
Okay. I really need to get you introduced to Dave, so you guys can talk about content, his perception of content, and Unison. And if it doesn't happen whenever the podcast is out, well, I mean, these are live now. You should go watch it because we get into it.
Mhm.
I think you'd find it interesting.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Remind me, what is Unison?
It's a functional programming language where you take your code and divide it into ASTs that get
That's right.
that get
That's right.
a hash that you can
Mhm.
essentially everything gets versioned by hashes, and it's then deployed edge cache. Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, I was talking to someone involved with the project I actually went to school with
Oh, really?
recently, and it's I love these applications of functional programming. I think it's incredibly cool and such a good case study of why functional and immutability and being able to deterministically say same thing, same results
Yeah.
is great. I also find it difficult to really spend time on these things knowing that they're not applicable to the tech stacks most developers that I interact with use.
Yeah.
But I love getting involved or at least learning from some very high level, say, functional project and then
Sure.
trying to take those learnings back
Sure.
into the rest of us, as
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah, well, when you mentioned the ESLint, generating AST, then it started to click.
Mm.
And then I was like, oh, this thing over here, what could you bring back from that?
Yeah. If I were to rework the typical boot camp or college curriculum,
Oh, we got in that conversation too.
ASTs would be on that list towards the end. I think one of the flaws of a lot of college curriculums, including the one I went to at RPI, was that while it has a lot of really good algorithms base, there's not enough practical stuff in there, which RPI at the time was starting to fix, so it might be much better now. I know there are a lot of great people working on that there. But also at the same time, a lot of boot camps give you a lot of practical without a lot of underlying base. They just don't have the time. How could you? So I'd love to see something that takes people through both the kind of data structures algorithms side of programming after teaching you the foundations and then unifies the two with real life projects and understanding the theory of things like ASTs. That would be fantastic. Bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would. I definitely watch with the conversation with Dave and I because I think you'll enjoy all of it. Okay, to wrap up, where do you want to encourage people? Right, we've got the mic for a bit. where would you like to send folks? Encourage them. What would you like to point to them? What do you got?
I have a few answers if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
For different segments of the populace. If you are interested in TypeScript, definitely reach out to me I'm on Fosstodon and Twitter as Joshua K. Goldberg, also GitHub. Buy my book, Learning TypeScript. Also, there's a free trial of O'Reilly anyone can get if you're not sure the book's for you. If you're interested in open source, also just reach out to me. I love talking with new folks. I'm not yet so internet famous that I can't do that, and I'm not sure I ever will be. If you're interested at all in TypeScript ESLint, which is an extremely important part of the TypeScript ecosystem, very critical, and doesn't get a lot of love because we haven't had time to evangelize till recently, TypeScript-ESLint.io. Please sponsor me and/or sponsor it. Anyone in the world, any amount helps. Lastly, I'm starting a project, as I mentioned, that's going to first try to create a set of resources to help explain why companies should get involved, time and or money in open source. Let me know if anyone wants to get involved. Even just telling us, this is what I tried and here's why it failed, why people didn't listen to me, is just really useful user research for us.
Yeah, and then, absolutely. I would like to know how we could double back on that and have it as part of our stuff too.
I would love that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, this was a pleasure.
I appreciate you speaking and coming out and helping.
Thanks for having me,
We got some
honestly.
of your books to give away. That
Oh, yeah.
They're in the office. I just need to pull them out, so we'll pull them out tomorrow during the keynote. So remind me
I will do
before,
that.
and we'll make sure to give them out.
Thank you.
And check out Josh.
I'm trying to figure out which
I'll put
camera to
links,
look at. Yeah.
this one, and then this one, and this
Yeah.
one, and then we'll put the links in the description.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks.
Clark. Were you just referencing Hot Ones right there? This camera, roll out the red
I
carpet.
guess I just did.